Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 3, episode 5 of the HONESTea. My name is Angela Malakai. I am so grateful that you've decided to join me here. We just keep it real here. It's all about the honesty and being and the authenticity, and we talk about all of the things that matter. And what I really, really, really am passionate about is people stepping into their greatness around utilizing their gifts they were born with, gifts that life's given them through adversity, and then being brave enough to use those gifts and step into who they've always meant to be. And I believe it's my purpose. And I show up as authentically as I can to help you to understand that your authenticity, your honesty, and who you are is enough. And that when you do that, you can step into your greatness too. And and I really believe that in all areas of life that we get to be the leaders, not just in our businesses, in our communities, in our families, but for ourselves. And so today's episode is, it's actually something that I'm living through right now. And it's really interesting because I always talk about that, healing is a journey and so is growth. It's not a destination, right? We're always growing, evolving, learning. And a lot of times, people will say, oh, I've done a whole lot of healing, and that's great. And I'm sure you have. The people that are listening to this podcast more than likely have listened to podcasts, have read the books, have done the growth, have, done all of those things. People in my community, same deal. People that are my clients, same deal, because we are stepping into what's next. But never ever get it confused. Whilst you're stepping into your greatness, there's still growth that is happening. And I've had, real awareness around this. And it's so funny because a lot of times I kind of think, I'm quite evolved, and I'm really, very aware of my own wounds, and I try really, really hard to ensure that's happening. But, I don't know if you've ever had a time when you think, I thought I have dealt with this. Like, what is going on? It's like, really, you feel like you've done the work, you've had the therapy, you've had the coaching, that you've grown, like I've said, you've watched the podcast, you've done all the things, and yet life, starts to life all over you. Um, and you think you've got this great awareness around, so if, and this is absolutely how I feel about myself, and what I try to instill in my clients is that you don't need to work with me forever. Like, I want you to get to a point where you can see your own wounds and become more aware. But what happened to me this week was that life gave me these 3 different scenarios in 3 completely different places. And I'm like, what is going on? Like, what am I not seeing? I thought I was in a place where I could really see what was going on. Why is this turning up for me? Um, what are we doing this again for, And so that's where I've been. Not exactly the same circumstances, but as those wounds were presenting themselves, I realized, oh my gosh, there is a common theme. I thought there wasn't, but I could see that there really was the same wound turning up. And if I'm really honest with myself, and this is the authenticity part, is it's not just about being honest with other people, it's about being honest with yourself. That's the real growth, being honest with yourself. And the wound for me is around always feeling misunderstood. And I really thought I dealt with it, but what I realized is that healing, well, we know this, healing doesn't mean the wound never shows up again, it means that you meet it differently. And I noticed that about myself. So I noticed that when I feel misunderstood, I reach for more words because I believe one of my gifts is communication, right? So I believe that I'm a really good communicator. And so it used to turn up in this way where, before when I was, probably very much in my victim mentality maybe, or just, I'm the kind of person that I just love so deeply, really, really deeply and easily, and I forgive really quickly and easily too. And I really want to be understood because I always had this feeling like if I could just get you to understand, then you'll get me, you'll understand me, you'll love me, or you'll figure it out, and what I learned is that more words don't create more understanding. But what I used to do, right, in my old wound is send these long like messages, on Messenger or, and say, but, da 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 da, hoping that I'm going to send all of these messages and they're going to finally get it. So anyway, thinking I'm so past that, I'm not the over explainer anymore. I don't need to do that. But then these situations turned up in my life, one where I had no voice, one where I thought I had a voice, and one where my voice was being very, very, very misconstrued. That's how I felt about those three situations. And what I realized is that wound about being misunderstood was still there, and still I reach for more words. Now, not in the same way, but in similar way, like I thought, well, if I clarify via an email, if I clarify via a message, if I go to a cafe and have a face-to-face conversation, if I was thinking that my clarity, if I could give them clarity, they would be able to see. And the truth is that they were never going to be able to see it. In one particular situation, that person was never going to be able to see what I was trying to explain. And not because they're a bad person, there's zero judgment around this. I've been seeing these posts around people saying, if someone's determined to misunderstand you. I don't think that's true. I don't think we are determined to misunderstand, but I do think that sometimes we have a perception of somebody and they represent for us a mirror, which is difficult. I also know for sure that we are filtering all of our experiences through our own filters, what life experience we've had, what wounds we have, what gifts we have, what, the way we were brought up, the things that we believe to be true, all of those things mean that we have our own perception of every situation. And so sometimes it won't matter how many ways you try to communicate. That person is incapable of understanding you. And I think that's the thing, is that I kept believing that if I communicated in a different way, and also the other thing is that was very different from the way that I used to communicate, is that I was giving a lot of presence to the situation, as in I was saying, I take ownership of this. I think we all get to show up how we want to. I don't think there's anybody right or wrong. And it didn't matter what I said, it actually escalated things and got things worse. And I will also admit that I turned up in my own wound as well, because there was a point where I was like, I felt really bullied, and I said that, so I was definitely in this wound, and what I recognize is that this was the old me in that wound showing up, looking a lot more healed, a lot more evolved, saying things from a real place of centeredness, and trying to say, hey, like you get to have your opinion and I get to have mine, and we're both turned up in our wounds, and we both, all of those things. And this is to provide clarity for you, and really hoping to have resolution to the situation, and then realizing there was no resolution. And that was hard for me. Gosh, it was hard, realizing that I'm not going to ever get this person to like me, that they were like not cool. It didn't matter how many words I used or how many ways I explained or how loving I thought, if I could just be more loving and more kind and more, that they would get me. But they couldn't get me, because they have their own wounds and their own beliefs and their own, filters that they're coming in with. But not only that, because this was my opportunity to grow from it and to see that I needed to grow in a way where it's okay to be misunderstood. It's also okay that this person might never, ever be good with me. And man, that's like, that's hard, right? Because we all want to be liked. We all want to be loved. We all want to be appreciated. And just to get to that place of accepting that it's okay, that it won't be, that was a growth for me. And I thought I'd kind of done it before, but I realized that I need to do that in every area of my life. And so, this is what it happens with authenticity, that sometimes it's going to mean that we have to accept we're not always going to be everybody's cup of tea. Do you like that pun? So yeah, I mean that's exactly what it is that this growth, this turning up authentically, means that sometimes you will be misunderstood, that sometimes there are situations where it doesn't always feel good and it doesn't always feel amazing, and sometimes, and just being, in the peace with that. And also recognizing that these wounds show up again and in different ways, and you might handle it differently because you might feel like you've evolved to this place, but actually there is another layer to that onion. There is another situation, there is another growth, and this, really, really brought this to the surface for me. I entered this collaboration with genuine hope and believing we were building something beautiful, and just, the lack of clarity from the beginning, and then me trying to communicate and over explaining, I think, trying to desperately preserve this relationship, wanting to make sure everybody felt okay, and just hoping that if I just explained myself one more time, things would land differently. And then dealing with the sadness and the grief that comes from it didn't, and eventually making the decision to walk away, like that was so heartbreaking for me. It really, really was incredibly heartbreaking. And it was also a growth, and it was something I needed to do for myself and for the situation, for that collaboration, for everybody that was involved. I knew that it was the right thing, but it was really hard. It was a difficult thing to do. And like I said, neither are, it's not because we're bad people, right? Both have really good intentions. And nobody turns up trying to hurt one another. It just happens. And nobody says, oh, how can I misunderstand somebody today? But we all have wounds. We have those, and our autonomic nervous system does turn up. And ego, I've talked about the ego, which is not a bad thing. Our protective personality shows up. Because we are human. That ego is not to be judged. It is part of who we are. It's our protector. our protective personality that shows up, and we're all seeing life through our own filters, our experiences, our wounds, our fears, our own beliefs, you know. And if you've ever studied NLP or you understand neuro-linguistic programming, you'll understand that we all delete and distort and generalize information based off of all of those things, because we're human and that's what we do. We're all making meaning from what we are seeing and what we're experiencing, what we are experiencing and what we have experienced, not necessarily from intention. And I think that's the thing, is that, I wanted them to see my intention, and they probably wanted me to see the intention, but it's difficult to see because we're all coming from our own experience. So here's what I've come to realize. I really, truly don't. In fact, I know for sure people are not determined to misunderstand us. I think that they are determined to make sense of the world where they are standing, as we all are. And sometimes those things don't have congruence. They are very different. Because there was a part of me that desperately wanted us to arrive at the same understanding. I think that we both wanted a happy ending. I absolutely wanted a happy ending. I wanted everybody to walk away feeling good. And I wanted us to understand each other. And if I'm really honest, there's still a part of me that wants that. There's still a part of me that's even, I was thinking, oh, maybe if I just send one more just to finally say, hey, I'm still here and I'm still available, and there's still, there's still an opportunity, and I still think you're amazing. And, I still want to do that. I said, oh, can we just be friends? Can we just still be, we don't have to do the collaboration, but hey, can we just be mates? Like, there's still a part of me that wants that, but I really think the growth for me is to say, it's okay if we're not, it's okay. And to take my own understanding from it. And because the truth is, I don't like to end things that don't feel good. But that's the understanding, right? I don't like conflict. I don't like hurting people. I don't like feeling hurt from people. Nobody does. I really don't like losing people. That's so hard. But, I've realized not everybody is going to understand me. And I've said this before, but I truly get it now. I think the more painful place is that not everybody is going to like me. Not everybody's going to understand me, but not everybody can understand me, which is not making them wrong. And it doesn't make me wrong either. Sometimes we just have different perspectives, different realities that we are living in, that we are growing in, that we are pursuing life in. We have different experiences, different capacities, different values, different expectations. One of the things I heard recently is clarity breeds confidence, and absolutely, making sure that we have clarity when there are expectations is another learning. And no amount of explaining can bridge a gap between the people when there is no ability to cross. And that's heartbreaking, because sometimes we're not grieving the person necessarily. We're grieving the possibility of what could have been. We're grieving what we hoped something could become. We're grieving a relationship that could have been something great, or a partnership that could have been so prosperous and fruitful, you know. And that we're grieving the ending that we wish we'd had versus the one that has shown up now, you know. And that's not necessarily the end either, you know. So there's always possibility, right? There's always possibility. I believe in endless possibility that things can grow and change. But yeah, that's why sometimes growth, it feels like grief. It feels like struggle. It feels difficult. And that adversity, it becomes your gift when you recognize it. Because we don't outgrow things. We, you know, we don't just like outgrow them and then we're cool. Sometimes we have to mourn them. I've had to mourn so many things that I didn't want to have to, but that's the growth. And one of the hardest things for me has been realizing that my peace can't depend on everybody agreeing with my story. Because if peace depends on everybody understanding me, then I'll spend my whole life trying to convince people, trying to explain, trying to defend, trying to prove, you know, trying to change their story so I can trust my own, you know. And that's the reality, looking for the external to tell me that I'm valuable, trying to convince somebody to see the value in me. And it's exhausting. That's why you get exhausted and overwhelmed, right? That's why we get so tired. That's why it feels difficult. And so here's what I know now. I don't actually need everybody to understand me. I need to understand me. I need to know that I acted with integrity. I need to know that I communicated honestly. Sometimes raw, sometimes I, you know, probably said something that felt accusatory to that person or whatever, you know, like I'm not perfect. So I didn't know exactly how to say it right. But I need to know that I was clear. I need to know that I did my best. And then I need to trust that, you know, not because I don't care about the situation or the person, not because I don't love them or love life, not because I don't wish things had been different. Of course, I wish things had been different, but because my peace cannot depend on someone else seeing things exactly the way I do. That is the exhaustion, right? And I think that's where compassion lives. The compassion lives in not everybody is agreeing with you. Not everybody understands you. Not everybody sees you. Not everybody is agreeing. But in recognizing that everyone is carrying things we can't see, everyone is making meaning from experiences we know nothing about. And the most loving thing we can do sometimes is stop trying to convince, you know, stop trying to prove, and stop trying to force understanding. Just simply, you know, be at peace and say, well, this is true for me. For me, be at peace with your own story. This is truth for me. And allow other people to have their truth too, even when it hurts you, and even when it feels like their truth is wrong, that you allow people in their truth. Even when we don't like the ending, even when we wish things had turned out so differently. And the other thing that I've realized, healing isn't becoming impossible to hurt. We still get hurt. And I think I talk about that, processing our hurt and our pain. But it is learning not to abandon yourself when you're in pain and when you're grieving something, and giving all of your power away to that situation or that person. And it isn't getting the ending you wanted either. It's accepting the ending you got and then choosing to trust yourself anyway. And then I think probably the greatest freedom of all is no longer needing to chase or change their story, and truly trusting your own story, trusting who you are. And, I'm still a work in progress too. I'm still learning, and we are learning and we are growing together. And that's what I love. And maybe you are too. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. I appreciate you more than you will ever know. Everybody that's turning up, watching the podcast on whatever platform they are, I so appreciate you. And as always, leave you with this message. My hope, my prayer, my wish for you is that you will fulfill your hero's journey, that you will live your personal legend, that you will step into your greatness, and that we all get to heal deeply and lead boldly and live fully. And one more truth I'm going to leave you with, and what I'm really leaning towards in terms of our gift, is what if we were all born gifted? I love you all and I appreciate you so much, more than you will ever know. Mwah.